Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. I am Brian Nemhauser. You can find me and all that we do here on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram at Hawk Blogger. Of course, you can get the audio version on Apple Podcast, Spotify, wherever you like to get it, or the ad-free version on patreon.com/hawkblogger. Somehow, some way, this is the number one Seahawks podcast on the planet for the number one football team on the planet, the Seattle Seahawks. And we have a really fun show this morning. We're going to have a guest on here who we've talked about a fair amount, but we've never had the chance to actually talk to. And my preference is always to have the conversation live. And finally, we were able to get the man, the myth, Ben Solak from ESPN on the show, father of two children under the age of 2. So let's be gentle. Let's be gentle with Ben Solak because God knows if you're a parent, 2 under 2 is real work. Ben, how you doing this morning?
I'm well. Thanks for asking. No, it's the bomb. You don't sleep very much, but it really is the bomb.
Yeah. Well, every little milestone is a celebration, and that's not just their development, but the longer they sleep, the more they do themselves, all that's coming up. So it's actually my son's birthday is 25th, so a little bit different age range, but he can rent a car now, so that's right. A big day for
I
him.
was telling my younger brother that. I was like, listen, they tell you 21's the big one, 18's the big one, 25's the big one. No more extra charge for renting the car. That's real nice. All right, that's the enjoyable stuff.
Well, happy birthday to Isaac if you're down there. I'm sure he's not listening, but his friends might be. So, Ben, since we haven't had you on, something we always do with first-time guests is just kind of hear your story. So, how did you get started? How did you get into this? Why did you get into this?
Yeah, I was in college and I walked into college with a major. And then by the end of year 1, realized that was not the major. And so in year 2, I was just doing the core curriculum and just trying to figure out what life was. And I was a big Eagles fan and I was, reading Eagles pieces. I said, "Oh, come blog for this thing." I said, "Why not? Like, I like writing. I like the Eagles." I was just bored. I wanted something to do. That started to go well. And, the editor there encouraged me, okay, get on Twitter, kind of engage with the community. And then from there, over the next couple of years in college, I got, jobs covering the draft for the Draft Network. I started working with Bleeding Green Nation, covering the Eagles. And so by the time I graduated, I had a job, right? I had money. And so I was like, okay, we're not going to mess around with this. And then the next year was COVID, 2020 hit. And at that point, I had a job and a lot of people didn't. So I was like, okay, let me take this very seriously. So COVID was when I really put a lot of my back into the work. And then I started at the Ringer a couple years later, was at the Ringer for a few years. And then at ESPN 2 years now, this upcoming summer. And so for me, it was a lot of it was the fact that I was kind of discovering it very late. I feel like a lot of people in our industry grew up on sports radio and grew up on ESPN and 30 for 30s and just it's been their life for forever. For me, I didn't really have it much growing up. We were a big football fan. We watched it every single Sunday, but we did not have the channel like ESPN or NFL Network or anything. My dad was not get the fantasy football magazine to the house sort of a guy. And so I just to me, the pinnacle of NFL coverage was, Bill Cowher on the CBS morning show, be like, they got to run the ball, that was it. I was like, he's the smartest guy in the room. And then when I got to college, I started to learn about this was mid 2010s. And so this was when Mina was writing, right? And I would read Mina. I was like, oh my God, I didn't even know this was allowed. I didn't know you could cover the sport like this. So my enthusiasm for the industry hit all at once, right when I was in the prime, looking for a career window. And so I kind of took on the torrent and I had a lot of energy for it, enthusiasm for it. And 10 years later, here we are.
Yeah, I think that for a lot of people that have the rise that you did, it's not just, oh, they're just talented and they're good at what they do, but there's something in the coverage that you want to see that isn't out there and that you try to provide. And I'm curious for you, what is it that you feel separates your work and your perspective on what you're trying to create?
Yeah, that's a good question. So one of the coolest things about discovering the industry, especially again talking about this mid 2010s period, was draft breakdown was the thing. And so first there's just film. You could just all right, I demand to see all of Donnell Pumphrey's runs, and you could just have them. That was crazy, right? That didn't exist 10 or 15 years ago. So there's a lot more film that was available. And then we were at that stage again. This is when we were really starting to get some ex players into the industry, not just to do Stephen A. Smith impressions, but be hey, this is what's happening on this play call. This is why this is going this way. This player's good. This player's not so good. It's strengths and weaknesses. So the fact that there was just clinics online from like coaches that I grew up watching explaining how they did things was like mind-boggling to me. So you're consuming all that content, you're loving it. But one of the weaknesses was that when you have exclusively ex players and ex coaches trying to get all this schematic information and all this, like, very rarefied and withheld NFL information to the everyman, they don't speak the everyman language anymore, right? It's a little bit like those who don't do teach sort of a thing where it's like, okay, these are the best of the best. They're not the best at getting it back down to Joe Schmo, right? They're good at like actually, doing and executing it here. And so one of the voids that I experienced was, okay, if I can learn this, when I then go to do content around it, be like, wow, like, I remember I got the AJ Barner touchdown against the Rams in the comeback in week 16, right? Like that concept and how they got set up and then they brought it to the corner. Like I can understand how that got set up, how Clint Kubiak set up that pitch, why that call worked. But hopefully when I explain it as part of content, I can do it in a way that's a little bit more palatable and digestible to a guy who's never really broken down film before, relative to some of like the wonderful ex-players we have in the space doing a similar thing, because they just don't remember what it's like to be at zero, to not know and understand any of this. And like, to point out and highlight some of the things that are going to be very surprising, very interesting to like the everyman. So that's where I always try to find myself in the link, is saying like, all right, I want my content to be educational and entertaining, but I want it to be extremely accessible relative to what some of our ex-players do, which is really good, but they just don't speak the same language going up and down the chain the way you can if you're somebody who came from not a football background.
Yeah, that's great. And I think that you absolutely accomplished that. I think one of my favorite, watches for you this past season was, you're always great when you're on with Mina. You guys feed off each other. I think it's pretty cool that you're able to be on with the person that used to read. Mina's been on this show all the way back when she was doing investigative stuff for ESPN, the magazine, and before. But I remember having her on after Frank Clark was drafted by the Seahawks, and we had questions about that. So, but you guys, before the Rams game, the first Rams game against the Seahawks, your combined enthusiasm for how good of a game that was going to be. It was one of the only previews I listened to outside the market, really outside anywhere, that was so excited about the quality of football and why. And I just don't think that a lot of people genuinely feel that. So I appreciate that from both of you. And seeing what was really the best two teams in the NFL clash 3 times last year was, I think, an underrated treat for football fans.
NFC Championship game was the Super Bowl, and it was the Super Bowl before wildcard round. We kind of had the sense that it was going to be the Super Bowl, I think. That was, for me, I did like a lot of betting content perspective. Just everything I was writing was like, NFC to win Super Bowl, NFC champion to win. Like, you just want to be futures in this division. That was clearly the strongest division. Those are clearly the 2 best teams. I do think that if you sat down, you forced the 3rd best team, it would be the 49ers. I think they were a clear step below, but still, like that, the NFC West of 2025 will live in my head for a long, long time, because like I think when I look back on like the last like 6 years, I've really done like exclusively NFL coverage. I think emphatically, like the best team I've seen not make a Super Bowl was this last year's Rams. They were so good. They were without question the second best team in football, very comfortably the second best team in football. And if they weren't the first, right, like over the bulk of the season before the Seahawks win it all, they were not the first by literally like the hair on Zach Charbonnet's 2-point conversion chin, man. Like, I mean, it was right there. So I'll remember that NFC West team, but specifically that Seahawks and Rams, for a long time in terms of how that season came down to those very, very tight coin flips.
Yeah, well, and that's a good chance to talk about where we are now, right? So you've got the Seahawks team who obviously won the Super Bowl, had the highest point differential in the NFL, were dominant in a lot of ways. I think lost by a combined 9 points over their losses for the season. You've got the Rams, who were so close in every one of those games and so close to potentially raising the Lombardi Trophy themselves. And you got the 49ers, and you got a bunch of other teams. And they've all taken kind of different paths through this offseason so far. We're into the first few weeks of free agency, and this is where we get to have some fun. So, like, it doesn't matter what the rankings are for free agency at this point. It doesn't matter what anyone really thinks, but it is sure fun to debate. And we love on this show, the saying is, we love being wrong, because that's when you learn. So, like, there's definitely
a good person on for that, then, man.
I was wrong about quite a bit. So one of the things I was teasing you yesterday, you had your rankings of free agency come out on ESPN, and you ranked teams 1 through 32. And I joked with you that, yeah, Ben Solak had the Seahawks ranked really low again. They're probably going to win the Super Bowl for a second time.
It's probably only like NFC championships. I won like 27 this time. I'm 31 last year. That got them all the way there. All right. So no, not as far this time.
It's true. You could have done the Seahawks a solid and just had them lower, but appreciate that. So I think before we get into this and understanding your thought process, I think it's really important. There's different ways you can do rankings, and you didn't do your rankings based off of, who improved the most or who made the best signing. You had a different criteria for how you did your rankings of free agency. Can you share that with folks?
Yeah, well, I think that if every team went into the free agent period with $40 million, then we'd be able to rank, okay, who did the best and who did the worst. But the nature is that they don't. And so to do a free agency ranking, we're just like, all right, who got the most better? It's the same as going to over the cap, sorting by 2026 free agency space, going by, okay, who walked in with the most and going down to who walked in with the least. Like that's going to give you 80% of your rankings. Oh, the Raiders and the Titans got a lot better. Well, the Vikings didn't. Like, yeah, no, the Vikings had like $50 million over the cap. Like, they're never going to substantively add talent. So for me, I try to grab every single significant move, which is free agency acquisition, free agency signing, internal reacquiring, right? It's like extending your guys, who you have to release, trades that you go through, and also how you sign your contracts and the value of the deals you get. And just every single move, I have a big spreadsheet. I give it like a plus, 2 plus, 3 plus, minus, 2 minus, 1 minus, or 3 minus. And then I try to say, okay, like who just every single move that they made, who just I felt like gained edges relative to the money they spent, the opportunity they had, and who do I feel like made moves that I wouldn't have made. After that first pass, things always look like super weird. And then you have to circle back and you have to say, okay, like, sure, I think that like the Monteric Brown internal extension from the Jaguars is good, but like, is that like how much weight does that actually have relative to like the Panthers signing Jalen Phillips? You have to try to calibrate to like, okay, this guy's gonna make a 3-down player. This guy's not necessarily that. Like, so you end up going through like a weighting process to try to make it look a little bit more like, okay, yes, but like even if this move is a little bit of an overpay, like it's still such a good player, and so you have to give it some more weight. And then you end up with a very heuristic ranking. It's a very non-scientific, plug the numbers in, you get it. And so after I list the player, the teams always look at it and I'm like, all right, they're going to be mad. They're going to be mad. They're going to be mad. And when I listed it and I saw where I had the Seahawks, I was like, all right, I'm screwed. But like, you lost a lot of talent and you couldn't keep a lot of talent. That's the nature of being a Super Bowl team. You're never going to win the offseason after a Super Bowl. That's just really hard to do because you're almost inevitably going to lose multiple starters. And so that's where the Seahawks are right now.
Well, so let's talk about that. I'm actually really interested in a lot of your rankings, but I might as well start with the Seahawks. I'm sure that's where most people are interested, tuning into this show at least. So, what did you expect going into free agency from the Seahawks? What did you think that they should do that they did not do?
So to me, like the big three in terms of the major free agents were Kenneth, Rashid Shaheed, and then Reek Woolen. And I understand that for a lot of Seahawks fans, their response to Reek Woolen is going to be no. Like, he's a guy who's we've had, frustrations with. Like, he at times had to bench him. He started this season like, cornerback 4, and he like wasn't even a part of the rotation. And then only when Nick and Witherspoon came back did he like get in the rotation. And so like I understand that reaction. He like led the league in yards per coverage snap allowed. He's 6'1", runs a 4.3. Like, this is a valuable player, right? The Eagles, he went and signed the 1-year prove-it deal with the Eagles at $15 million to set himself up for signing a contract in the mid-20s next year, right? Like, this is a player that was highly coveted in league circles in the thought that he was going to get out of Seattle. So I know that Seahawks fans are like, Woolen was not a guy that we were planning on re-signing. The league was thrilled about that. So Woolen, Walker, and Shaheed to me were like the three big ones. I think Mafe is always getting out of the building. And then I should say Kobe Bryant, I thought it was very reasonable that he left. I understood that he was going to leave because you have so much depth at safety. The Ty Okada, breakout this year when Love was out was very impressive. But Bryant was also like a really solid player. It's just Mafe and Bryant, I kind of consigned myself to these guys going to get out the building. With the money that you had, because Seahawks like 5th right now in 2026 space. I know they have the Spoon contract coming up and with the JSN contract coming up. With the money that you had, you should have been able to keep 2. You should be able to keep 2 of the 3 and then lose the 3rd. Seattle doesn't do that. And I think that they probably walked into the season, like probably walked into the postseason thinking they could get Kenneth Walker for $9 million. And then Kenneth Walker just caught fire, won Super Bowl MVP, and then Breece Hall got franchise tagged. And it's like, oh, shoot, right? Like we are in, like this price tag skyrocketed. So I think the Walker elevation is really what kind of caught them a little bit, like, by surprise and not where they wanted to be financially. But so they end up, Walker gets out of the building, Woolen gets out of the building. They put the extension on Job. They put the extension on Drake Thomas. one of the things that you got to be able to do as when you have a Mike McDonald, you have like an elite schemer, is say, okay, some of the UDFAs and some of the late round guys that we've been able to elevate are not the players that we want to be investing in, because we should be able to do this again by going and getting day 3 guys and UDFA guys and plugging and chugging them into these spots. We kind of want to be paying at the top of the market and then churning that middle bottom tier of the roster. So that would have, I did not think that they were going to bring back both Job and Thomas. I thought they were going to be able to bring back at least one more of Walker and Woolen. And to me, like, they were a little bit too cautious and future oriented with the money. Now, Witherspoon's coming up, and obviously, as we then saw, they signed an enormous JSN extension, right? And so they're very clearly trying to be really cognizant of the future money. Darnold's going to want an extension after this upcoming year, so I understand the future protection. And they're also at a point where the team's getting sold, and the team being sold always puts a little bit of a fridge on future money, because you don't actually know who's paying out that 2028 roster bonus, and he might not be the current boss, right? And so you have to be careful when you start borrowing from future years. So that was my like overarching perspective on what they did this year.
So one of the things that makes sense, especially the Ken Walker, that was I think the most pivotal decision the Seahawks were going to make this offseason, given especially what had happened with Zach Charbonnet's injury. If Zach Charbonnet hadn't been injured, I don't think the Seahawks would have brought him back at $10 million. I think the Seahawks always planned to move on, whether or not I agreed with that or others. I think that was always their plan. But one of the things I was curious about, and this is kind of a juxtaposition, and we'll kind of get back to the Seahawks. This is not fully updated, but a look at all the teams and now sorted in reverse order of how much they spent on external free agents. So the fourth column over there with $302 million for the Tennessee Titans, with 11 players that they added were not on their roster, is at the top of the league. So you talked about, Ben, the Titans, the Raiders had the most money to spend. No shocker that they spent the most money.
Yeah.
But
that
then
top 5 right there is a good perspective on 5 teams that are mad at me right now, right? Because they're much higher on other people's lists than they are on my list. Like Panthers fans, I put the Panthers like 17 because I thought they paid too much for Phillips and too much for Lloyd. And every Panthers fans in my mention explaining to me that Jalen Phillips and Devin Lloyd are good. I understand that. I think you paid too much money for them.
That's helpful, because I was surprised where you had the Titans. I actually liked the Titans offseason, but now once I understood your reasoning, I could see where you got there a little bit more. But the important thing here is you scroll down to the bottom, and there's really 2 teams that stand out. There's the Seahawks and the Broncos at the bottom, both played in their conference championships. The Broncos have literally spent $0 on external free agents. They did make a trade for Jalen Waddle, and the Seahawks have spent $5 million on external free agents. So like you look here at the Broncos kind of offseason, and it's a lot of re-signing their own guys, prioritizing comp picks, that kind of thing. And you look at the Seahawks offseason so far, and it's, again, re-signing a lot of their own guys, not affecting comp picks. Mm-hmm. And you had the Broncos at 5 or 6, I believe. Excuse me.
Yep. The Broncos were 23rd before the Jalen Waddle trade.
Okay. So the Waddle trade held a lot of water for you. And
enormous.
I guess my question for you there is, you trade a first, a third, and a fourth round pick swap to pay Jalen Waddle $28 million. The Seahawks trade a fourth and a fifth last year for Rashid Shaheed and pay him $17 million, whatever it ended up being. Why is one such a more positive move than the other?
Well, one, because the Broncos are at such a different team stage, right? In the sense that they have the rookie contract quarterback. It's worth noting, like, the Shaheed trade happened mid-season. I loved the Shaheed trade. I was very proud. I think I was on Mina's Pod Live when that happened, and I was like, heck yeah, absolutely. So that was not the trade that got folded into my extremely erroneous ranking of the Seahawks free agency period last year. So I like the Shaheed trade quite a bit for Seattle. The Waddle trade for the Broncos explicitly is, okay, you made it to the AFC Championship game. Sick. Your defense is awesome. I love it. There was issues with that offense. Broncos fans did not like to talk about those issues, but they were, right? They were substantially worse against zone coverage than they were against man coverage. Over the last 2 seasons, Bo Nix's entire career, he is the worst quarterback in the league, in terms of high volume dropbacks, on off-target rate, on throws 10-plus yards down the field, and success rate on throws 10-plus yards down the field. He is not particularly accurate when he has to push the football. So you need to have a guy who, A, has a zone solution for you, because Cortland Sutton's going to be your man beater, and B, you need a guy who can create explosives without downfield targets, because that's never going to be the strength of your quarterback. Waddle is perfect for that, right? And they were talking about Waddle at the deadline last year, and it was like, all right, we're getting close. Like, is this happening? Yes or no? And I was hoping that they would get Waddle, because when you have a rookie contract quarterback, you're in one of two paths. You're in, oh my God, it's Superman, Drake May path. I was like, okay, we just want to be cap healthy and developing youth forever. Like, obviously, we're going to, attack the rookie contract quarterback window now because we have it. But, this guy's always going to put us somewhere near contention. The second path, which I would argue is the Bo Nix path, is okay. When he's on the second contract, this is going to be really tough, right? This is not this is more of a Clark Kent than it is a Superman in terms of the impact. So we really need to be aggressive in this current contract window. And if the Broncos had walked through the entire offseason and just re-signed players, I was going to be a little pissed, right? I went on SportsCenter, I want to say it was like the Thursday or the Friday of free agency period, and they're like, give us your losers for free agency. And I started with the Broncos. So I was like, Justin Strenad, right? Like, we were in the AFC Championship game. Like, come on. And so, to me, moving for Waddle, especially, I thought that the price for Waddle was quite good relative to his age and to his contract situation. Multiple years of team control. He's only 27, turning 28. It's rare to find a guy who can be a wide receiver 1, but then also has a lot of value as a wide receiver 2. I think that he's one of those players because of the field stretching ability. So I love that trade for the Broncos. I just thought that was exactly what that team needed to be doing at this stage.
Well, so one of the things that's I think is interesting there, you talked about the Seahawks and the guys that left and some of the decisions there. You seem to understand, like, the Boye Mafe thing was likely always going to happen, and he was the one way to look at this is he was the 4th out of the 4 edge rushers on that team. So 3 of the 4 are coming back, right? And then Kobe Bryant, I think that was more of a question, but Ty Okada started 11 games last year. The Seahawks were 9-2 in those games that he started, and he actually played more than 30 snaps in 2 others, and they were 11-2 overall games he started. They were 2-0 in games that Kobe Bryant didn't play. That doesn't mean Kobe Bryant's not a good player, but also you can kind of understand the logic of where the Seahawks were going in terms of where their depth was. It sounds like a lot of it for you came down to the Ken Walker decision. And would you also put the Reek Woolen decision in there, or do you kind of understand that was always probably going to happen as well?
No, so I would say that, the thing you asked me was what did I expect relative to what happened, and that's where Ken Walker to me was surprising, because they definitely were in on trying to get it done, right? Like, there was reporting up until the deadline, will they tag him, will they not tag him? I never thought they'd tag him, but they clearly were engaged with him. So that was one that I thought could have gone the other way. Kobe Bryant is one where I certainly think it could have gone the other way. So that was, when you asked me what decisions were surprising, those were the ones there. In terms of what it comes down to in terms of the rankings, even if Mafe leaving is 0% surprising, because it isn't at all, this was a young, productive edge rusher on low quantity snaps, right? And so you have a guy who's a high pressure rate on low snaps. That's a great dude to have in your bullpen, because A, you feel comfortable hockey line in the line, and B, if somebody goes down, and let's be honest, when you're starting edges like DeMarcus Lawrence and Uchenna Nwosu, that's a more serious concern for you than it is for other teams. You feel really good about that guy. That 4th player now is going to be, we don't know, right? That's going to be a position that potentially gets drafted and developed. And as I said, speaking about Job and speaking about Drake Thomas, your expectation is, all right, Mike, here's a 4th round pick. Go find a guy who can be edge 4, and he should be able to do that, right? And that's how you have to be able to sustain at being an elite scheming coach in the NFL. If you think about what you've been able to get out of wide receiver 3s from Sean McVay with the Rams, you think about what Kyle constantly does whenever his running backs get hurt, right? If you're elite at something, you should be able to churn a little bit at the bottom of the roster. We don't need to invest in this too much. Niners are a bad example because they keep spending picks on running backs for some reason, but this is the skill you're supposed to have as an elite schemer. And so even if a move felt inevitable, it still weighs when I think about whether or not you got better or worse as a team. Without question, Mafe should have left. If I was Asia, I would have told him that. If I was John Schneider's assistant, I would have told him, let Mafe leave. He's going to be way more valuable to another team than to us. And he goes to Cincinnati, and it's a good deal for him in Cincinnati. It still hurts the Seahawks. Even if he was playing, the 4th most snaps at the edge position, no, it still is impactful in the free agency period.
Yeah, and we're talking to Ben Solak of ESPN, who's kind enough to join us for a few more minutes. And I think one of the things that's interesting there, and part of why it was surprising to me, the kind of the disparity between at least the Broncos high ranking and the Seahawks low ranking, is back in the 80s and 90s, right? No salary cap, plan B free agency at some point where you could protect your top 37 players and that kind of stuff. it was kind of the dream and kind of the cheat code to keep your team together. Like that was a casualty of the salary cap was that there you wouldn't be able to keep your team. The Seahawks now go into this period after winning the Super Bowl, having the number 1 point differential, being the best team in the NFL. They keep 61 out of 70 players that were on their roster at the Super Bowl. And then if you include IR, where Torrey Horton and a bunch of other guys were sitting there, 71 of 80 players that were with them last year return this year. And that includes 37 out of 39 on offense, 31 out of 36 on defense, every starter on defense. And so I think part of what was a little surprising to me, Ben, in your evaluation was it is really hard to keep together the most talented team in football back-to-back years. You go back to the Eagles lost a year ago after they won the Super Bowl, or the Chiefs lost before that.
Looking up right now because I wanted to calibrate, because the Eagles lost Sweat, Milton
Williams.
I'm trying to think who else significant. Darius Slay left that team, but he he kind of become more so corner 2, corner 3.
Yeah, they had Mekhi Becton, Milton Williams.
Becton,
yeah. So I'm curious. I mean, as you look at a team that was not necessarily looking to add many players externally, but keep the team that they had together, does that strategy make sense to you?
Yeah, there's an inevitable talent drain after you lose the Super Bowl. How you go about it is kind of conditional on where you are in terms of your youth and your roster health and your cap pick situation. For the Eagles last season, Josh Sweat and Milton Williams got out of the building. They had drafted Nolan Smith and Jalix Hunt and Moro Ojomo in anticipation of Milton Williams and Josh Sweat getting out of the building, right? When you look at, say, the Seahawks, I think there's a different universe in which Horton stays healthy. And obviously they maybe would not have made the Shaheed trade. I know Horton got hurt afterward, but let's say Horton stays healthy the entire time. Maybe Shaheed's more likely to get out of the building because we've drafted, we developed, we feel better about this position, this player in place. You brought up the Charbonnet injury and how it affected the Kenneth Walker contract, right? So there's a little bit, even in the case of looking at just Super Bowl winners to Super Bowl winners, apples to oranges, because I don't think I don't think I'm capable of looking at the Seahawks offseason and going, okay, relative to the last 15 Super Bowl winners, how well did they do? Because each one is different enough that the objective piece-wise is to rank them relative to these off seasons, right? And so they're always going to end up being a lower team just by virtue of they're an expensive team that's going to be losing contracts. They just won the Super Bowl. They had these deals in place. They kind of built around this. Now, their guiding light is correct, right? There are some teams who, like the Cardinals, the Dolphins, I don't understand what the guiding light is. I don't understand what the North Star is. What's going on? The Seahawks guiding light is Spoon, JSN, Sam probably next year. Those are, if you could list the 3 most important Seahawks, those are 3 of the top 4, right? And Leonard Williams probably going to be your only other guy that I would argue for it. Those are your dudes. So their guiding light, I feel is good. And I don't fault the approach at all. You can't have this many snaps. I think the Packers were 30th for me. I understand what the Packers are doing. The Packers are soft resetting without question. You're still going to come in low on Ben Solak's 2026 free agency ranked when 3,000 snaps got out of the building, right? And it's a similar thing here for the Seahawks.
Yeah. I get all that. And we only have you for another second here, but I do think that you brought up one area that I agreed with was, there wasn't just one, but the 49ers and the Rams were an interesting place where you had them on the rankings, and you had the 49ers, I think, number 2. I thought their trade defensive tackle from Dallas was one of the better moves of the offseason for what they needed and what they got.
It much the same way the Waddle trade bumped up for the Broncos. It was a big move.
And so when you look at the NFC West as it stands right now, do you feel like you've got an idea of which of these teams, how they stack up against each other?
I think no. And I think you ask me after the draft, and then I'll say no. Ask me after training camp, and then at training camp, I'll say, okay, let me see a few weeks. The 2 best teams in football right now are the Seahawks and the Rams. And the 2 best teams in football 3 months ago and 6 months ago were the Seahawks and the Rams. I still believe that. Both teams still have some needs. The Rams have obviously made a huge investment in that secondary. I understand that that's ooh, we solved the problem. Buddy has to look at that linebacker room, and I'm like, gimme, gimme, gimme. So I still think they've got issues there. I think that they have wide receiver depth problem, right? Talk about living on the edge in terms of your health. Stafford, Nacua, and Devontae run that thing, and they got nobody else behind in terms of pass catchers. And so they need more in terms of depth. Seattle right now has a couple of questions that you need to fill out. I think interior offensive line is still a spot to handle. You want to know what the running back rotation is going to look like. San Francisco, they're good. What you tell me who plays, right? When we get to November football and December football. So Rams, Seahawks to me are still emphatically 1, 2 the best teams in the NFC West, best teams in NFL football. 49ers are a top 5 roster. It's just, this is a see it before we believe it sort of thing right now with their injury room.
Ben, really appreciate the time you spent with us. Tell folks what they have got coming up from you and where they can find you.
Yep. It's all draft coverage upcoming on the rest of the week. I'm at Benjamin Solak on all the socials. Ben Solak ESPN on YouTube because somehow there's already a Benjamin Solak on YouTube. But Benjamin Solak on all the socials, doing a bunch of draft breakdown stuff. Will be, on TV the next month, doing television. It's on ESPN. You know where to find it.
One last thing. Zion Young. Give me your quick Zion Young read.
Zion Young's got hammers for hands and he loves football. Draft him. It's not a hard one. Big fella, can bend the corner decently well, but just likes to hit dude, likes to control bodies, ton of power, good run defender, quick eyes. He's a good player.
Would you go edge or inside interior offensive line if you're the Seahawks at 32?
Interior offensive line, because we barely figured out a running game last year in time for the playoffs, and we need to be more positive that we have it this season. And then defensively, I expect to be able to fill out that edge backup spot a little bit more in the middle rounds.
Appreciate it. Ben Solak, make sure you follow him. Appreciate your time, Ben. All right, man. That was Ben Solak. Really, really appreciate him coming on, and good explanation here, like of how he came up to it. I think his process for how he decides his rankings is a little different than the way I would go about it, which explains a little bit more about why I see it differently. And, I always try to walk a little bit of a line with guests. I'm not actually looking to really pick a fight. I do like to find out where we can disagree on things and have a conversation. And so, I think I don't see the Broncos offseason as positively different than the Seahawks. In fact, I think the Seahawks did something much more difficult than the Broncos did. And the Seahawks were already a better team. So that was a little hard for me to kind of get behind. I also, as you guys know, I think that there's a little bit of an overemphasis on the snaps that left the building. I've shown you the number I pulled up before, that the amount of snaps that left the Seahawks in 2013 when they won the Super Bowl, significantly more than the amount of snaps that have left the building for the Seahawks from the 2025 roster. And that includes Kobe Bryant, who played over 1,000 snaps. So I think that this is still maybe a story not well told, but I do always really appreciate folks coming on to what could be an uncomfortable conversation with a fan base that does not agree with what he had said. So I do really respect that and appreciate that from Ben. And he puts thought into it. It's not like he just puts it out there to trigger people. He has his thoughts and he shares them, and I respect that. So a few other things. If you haven't already given the show a like, click subscribe, please do. If you haven't bought the book, We Did Not Care, you can do so at hawkblogger.com/book. I was actually just at Barnes & Noble yesterday at Bell Square, and I hadn't noticed it before. They had a whole display with my book all over the place. It was very, very cool. I kind of liked it. But you can get it, and I'm still trying to figure out more signings. I'm going to the league meeting in Arizona tomorrow. Maybe when I get back, we can figure out some more places to do some signings and get folks taken care of. But appreciate everyone that has already bought the book and shared their experience buying the book with me. So a couple bits of news, and then we'll get into some other stuff as well. Some things that I guess I reacted to differently than some other Seahawks fans. We have a date and a time and a day of the week, maybe most notably, for when the Seahawks will open the 2026 season. And they will open the 2026 season. They will open it on a Wednesday night at 5:35 p.m. Pacific time. It is, as far as I know, the first time the league has started the season on a Wednesday. Typically, it's a Thursday night game. And the fact is they are doing a Australia game for the first time with the Rams and the 49ers. And that's happening on Thursday night, United States time. It'll be Friday in Australia when it happens. It'll actually be Friday at 10:30 in the morning when it happens, for local time there for the Rams and the 49ers. But because of that, they needed to kind of rethink through when the Seahawks would play. Or maybe they just didn't. Maybe this was missed somehow. Maybe they knew the Rams game was going to be on a Friday, but they hadn't thought that actually that meant it was going to be on a Thursday in the States. I don't know. In any event, a lot of people really freaked out. They think it's really crap that the NFL is having the game on a Wednesday. I don't care at all. Like, at all. Like, why do I care? And here's my thought process. Like, it's the first game of the season. It's not like you're playing on, quote, a short week. You'll have been going through training camp, preseason. You'll have been, as rested as you're going to be. And it also is a pretty nice advantage for week 2. I mean, keep in mind the 49ers and Rams are all the way in Australia playing that game. And yes, I think they get maybe an extra bye week in between or something like that. I haven't looked, but the Seahawks are going to get an extra long break between week 1 and week 2. That's a good thing. That's always a good thing. So I don't know why it's a big deal that they're playing on a Wednesday. Some people just don't like it. I saw Alaric Jackson, the Rams left tackle, tweeting out about, the Seahawks, they had to find some place for the Seahawks to play. And I was like, what he wrote was they had to make room for Seattle somehow. Shrug emoji. Oh my God, for that Rams fan base that absolutely loves to say, living rent free in our heads, in your heads, like the amount of Rams players and coaches that talk about the Seahawks every time they open their mouth is off the charts. And I mean, that's the last thing I saw from a Rams player was, I think, one of their offensive linemen saying, "Oh, the Seahawks know we're better than them, and that like we had them last year." And then you got Jared Verse talking about them. Like, you had all these people like talking about the Seahawks. I honestly don't care. Like, I don't think about, we're rent free. And that whole saying is so stupid. They can talk about the Seahawks as much as they want. I'm going to talk about the Rams as much as I want as well. But the fact that their mindset that just seeps in through every crevice of that organization is, we were the best team. We are the best team. We were robbed. Like, everybody knows we were robbed, is such loser mentality. It is such a loser mentality. And I continue to believe that it comes from the top. Sean McVay has exuded that loser mentality. And I think that good luck to them. Add talent, which they've done. But when the moment of truth comes, are they going to make the play or make an excuse? So far, it's been really clear what the answer to that question is, and it's not the good one. So, you know what? They can continue to have sour grapes and throw shade the Seahawks direction. Dark side lives in the shade. They're fine there. So keep it coming. I think the Seahawks will be just fine. So that was one bit of news. Another bit of news. These are all random pieces here, but free agent running back Najee Harris, formerly of the Steelers, formerly of the Chargers, was reported to have visited the Seahawks yesterday. And here's the thing. I don't love this news. I don't. Najee Harris, to me, has always been, he rushed for 1,000 yards in, I think, each of his first 4 seasons. I'm going to pull that up to make sure I'm right on that. But I believe that's true. And I just was never impressed. I'm sorry. Like, he ran for 1,200 yards as a rookie. Then, yes, 1,000 yards in each of the next 3 seasons. He never averaged more than 4.1 yards a carry. Those 1,000 yards look impressive, but that is a lot of volume carries. He's getting 250 plus carries a season, over 300 carries his rookie year. And you look at things like his success rate, 46%, 48% was a high. Not like he was a pretty effective receiver, so I give him credit for that as well. At least his first year, he had 74 receptions, which is crazy. I just see kind of a lumbering back who also had an Achilles injury that caused him to miss most of last year. His agent, Doug Hendrickson, shared video of Harris running on a treadmill, and quote, at full speed. It was not a particularly impressive rate of speed. And people are like, you don't know what that was set to. And I'm like, I've seen enough football players, pro athletes run on those curved treadmills to kind of judge it by eye whether he's moving quickly. And other people are like, well, he's just 6 months from an Achilles, so that's pretty good. That's all fair, maybe. But Najee Harris was never a speedster. And now he's coming off an Achilles. And you just signed Emmanuel Wilson, who is already a 230-pound, known more for knocking guys over than he is for running past people. I just don't get it. I don't get the vision of adding a Najee Harris to this mix. It feels like redundant. And so we'll see. He's supposed to be going to visit the Raiders. It might have just been one of those things where they are checking in on his physical status, his medicals, and they can come back to him later if they need to. If it's more than that, nothing against him as a person, but just as far as roster construction, I don't get it. So I'm kind of hoping that's not where they're going. I would be more excited, honestly, if they got Alvin Kamara, and I know not everybody would be, but at least I can kind of see where Alvin Kamara would be additive to what they already have and create a nice floor from a veteran perspective of what they could get production-wise from the position. I don't know. So that's news. Just wanted to share. We'll keep going on. I will say the Puke Nacua memes, it's not funny what he did. It's just not. I mean, let them, since we talked about it last, I think there's been threats of a defamation lawsuit from Puke Nacua's side against his accuser. The accuser has talked about filing a suit back against them for pain and injury and whatever. But the Puke Nacua biting memes are so funny. I'm sorry. I maybe I shouldn't admit that they make me laugh, but like, you got the Hannibal Lecter ones, you've got the Jaws ones, you've got like the Dracula ones, I mean, I don't know. It's a long off season and it's nice to laugh. And those definitely have kind of caught my attention in a good way. So I'm trying to scroll through to see if there's anything else I missed. One of the guys that I spoke about and I actually talked about with James Foster yesterday. If you missed the show with James Foster yesterday, I highly recommend you listen. James is awesome. I'm going to try to have him back on the show more regularly. I really love his analysis. I think that website he's created is absolutely fantastic. So anyway, we were talking about running backs and both admiring Emmett Johnson from Nebraska. And I was kind of confused why he was so low on everyone's list. He's like 4th round for most people. And I think generally it's been his athletic testing that is he fast enough? He's not going to be a breakaway guy. You could see that. He's more of a lateral agility, like make you miss player than he is an explosive straight line speed guy. But at his pro day yesterday, he ran a 4.46 40, which is not terrible. And I still think that, he's not a first round pick. He's probably not a second round pick. But Emmett Johnson, to me, if you spend a third round pick on him, I don't think that's a bad use of resources. If you can get him later than that, even better. But the Seahawks don't have a pick until the 6th round after the 3rd. So that was, I think, at least somewhat news. And then we had a bunch of stuff from JSN and the press conference yesterday. And I will say I really appreciate folks that when someone takes video that includes me asking a question, that there's a lot of folks that get in the mentions like, hey, you should credit Hawk Blogger here. And I really appreciate that. That's nice of you all to kind of be on the watch for me. I will say, when somebody takes video and there's no picture of who's asking the question, and even if there was, they wouldn't know who I am. I don't expect people to know what my voice sounds like. I'm not anybody. So I wouldn't expect Ari Mirov or whoever else that takes the video to know that it's my voice. But I do appreciate people trying to educate folks about who is asking the question. So anyway, my reason I brought that up is I literally opened my phone and to check my feed for something, and there's an NFL.com clip, and I hear my own voice asking JSN the question of, hey, you've won Offensive Player of the Year, you won a Super Bowl, you're the highest paid receiver in the NFL. What's next? How do you reach that next level? And JSN answering, the only thing better than winning 1 Super Bowl is winning 2. And I think that is the mentality for this team. And I didn't get a chance to have a more one-on-one conversation with JSN. Hopefully we'll get to arrange that another time. But yesterday was not the day for it, as he did about a million interviews. And I felt like probably was not going to get a lot of quality time in that situation. But I don't think it's an accident that John Schneider spent a lot of his time when answering questions about JSN, mentioned who he is as a person, mentioned how he was raised, talked about how when you're asking for this kind of long-term commitment financially from an owner, that you want to know who you're giving that money to. And JSN checks all those boxes. You have to know that in their minds, that is doing double duty when they say those things. I don't think they're doing it because it does double duty, but it does double duty in the sense that it is both complimenting JSN for who he is and pointing out Puke Nacua is not that guy. He's just not. And the amount of times that Puke Nacua has been either on a police blotter or his brother's been on a police blotter or in the wrong place or doing weird things. I mean, that he's already probably done more in the last 3 months than JSN has done in his entire life, and maybe for the rest of his life. So I don't think that was an accident. And I'm sure that it's a comfort for the Seahawks. And I'll give you a little bit behind the scenes. So for some of these signings, they let employees know that they're going to do the press conference. The hall, the room that they do this in was absolutely packed, overflowing with people from the Seahawks organization, all there to celebrate. His family was there, friends were there, which is also really cool. And the way the organization kind of encircles these players is cool. It's special. And I'm sure a lot of teams do similar stuff, but this was not like every other signing. And I think it meant a lot to the team. And I think when they do the Devin Witherspoon signing, which I expect to happen, anytime now, could happen today for all we know. Best guess it'll probably happen after the league meeting, but who knows? So I think that will also be a really big deal. But getting that done yesterday with JSN, seeing that he had kind of reached that point, is just it's gratifying. I think that the right things are happening to the right people. When that happens, world's a little bit better. And JSN certainly is one of the right people. All right. Let's check on Super Chats here. There's a couple other things. Oh my gosh. Old School Seahawk has donated 50 Hawk Blogger memberships. Unbelievable. Thank you for doing this, OSS. Very, very generous of you. I love the generosity of this community. And if you want one of these free memberships, all you got to do is turn on gifting on YouTube, on your YouTube account. If you don't know how to do that, consider looking on Google for instructions on how to do it. Then all you got to do is like, subscribe, comments, watch all those things that engage with this channel. Allows YouTube to decide who's going to get one of these free memberships. So you can get one if you are one of those people that are participating actively with the show. All right. Very, very cool. All right. Let's check out some super chats on Venmo, venmo.com/Brian-Nemhauser. All right. We have got Joey Hamilton with one, says, do you think John Schneider is trying to get these big extensions worked out before a new owner comes in? How does ownership's input affect an offseason like this when a team is for sale? That's a good question, Joey. I don't believe that it has any impact on John Schneider's timeline. I think that his actions have been forecast really since last year. Brady Henderson has been on this show before, during last season, earlier in last season. He surprised me when he said, oh yeah, they're going to definitely extend Spoon and JSN next offseason. I'm like, well, they didn't do that with Charles Cross. Why are you so sure they're going to do it with those guys? And he didn't really get into it, but he's just like, everyone's different. And, so this has been in the works for a while. Brady's pretty connected and I think knows his stuff in that regard. As far as how ownership's input affects this stuff, it could, like a new owner comes in and you're asking to spend a lot of his or her money. They're going to have questions. Generally, I don't think most people would come in and question signing the best receiver in football to the highest contract before other players that are going to sign similar contracts get on the market, because John Schneider probably saved the owner money in the timing of when he did it. But you never know. I mean, when you own a team, you can do whatever you want within the league rules, and everybody's different. So I can't say for sure I really know how the owners are going to affect, because it really depends on who that owner is. As far as with Jody Allen, I don't think that she probably needed much more convincing on a JSN deal, and I don't think she'll need convincing on a Devin Witherspoon deal either. I will say this, and I generally, I'm not that superstitious anymore, but I'm superstitious about a few things, and injuries is one of them. I think that it is a little bit interesting that JSN and Spoon are going to get these market-setting deals, and both of them entered the league with injury concerns. Spoon not because he was injured, but because he was a slightly built, big-hitting secondary player. And the question was how that was going to hold up in the NFL. And in fact, there was times where, like, Spoon's, after the 2024 season, the thing that he was most proud of was that he made it through the whole year, because he's really worked on his body to be able to stand up to the rigors of the NFL. And JSN entered with, he had the hamstring injury. He had missed a lot of time, wasn't able to do a lot of workouts. He had some other injuries in college. And you look at him now, and you look at Spoon now, but you look at JSN. I don't think he's missed a game in the NFL. And I hate saying that out loud, because I feel like everyone's got to knock on wood. It's no guarantees of the future, but these are two players where there was durability concerns, and two players who, for the most part, have proven otherwise. And the Seahawks had I wouldn't say they had very good injury luck last year. They had a lot of players, a lot of players get injured and miss time. Spoon, Nicky Manwari, Julian Love missed a ton of time. They had some games without DeMarcus Lawrence. They had some games without Uchenna Nwosu, like games without Charles Cross. Like they definitely had their share of injuries. But a lot of the injuries that happened were kind of coincided with where they had depth or players available. When Spoon was out, Reek Woolen was able to step back in after he'd kind of been benched from week one. When Nicky Manwari was down, you were able to bring in D'Anthony Bell. When you had all those guys out, Darian Kendrick stepped in. Like you had a bunch of guys kind of step up and step in various roles. When Torrey Horton went down, Rashid Shaheed just happened to have been traded for at the same time. So I think there was some fortune in how the injuries fell and what positions they fell at. And you have no control over that. There's no guarantee that that'll continue in future years. And I don't say anything about it during the season until it's over because I feel like it's a jinx. But the Seahawks navigated that last year and won a Super Bowl. Now they've got to go back again. And as of right now, to Ben's point earlier, they have a little bit of depth questions more than they did last year at certain positions. And the number one position there is probably running back. Number two is probably cornerback. I think edge is 3. And I don't know, like maybe you can go safety at 4, depending on how you look at it. So I really do see the youth of the team working in the Seahawks' favor. And that's part of why they've been able to endure and actually stay healthy. Whereas the 49ers, they're one of the oldest teams in the NFL. I think they are the oldest offense in the NFL. And they really didn't do anything to get younger. And so we didn't have enough time because I took too much time on other things. I was, kibitzing with Ben. But that's my biggest question with the 49ers offseason is, like, why do you think that you're going to get healthier when you're just getting older and older? That just doesn't make sense to me. Maybe they'll catch lightning in a bottle, but generally speaking, that offense is creaky. And if Trent Williams goes down, they haven't done anything. Vidarian Lowe that they signed, I guess. I think they're not in great shape in that regard. So I was going to let's do a quick mock draft. I said I was going to try to do one every day. Let's do a quick mock draft. And then I got to run. But I'm going to do the PFF sim again because I like it. We're going to say big board. We'll do, I don't know who Aiden Tucker is, but we're going to do Aiden Tucker's big board. All right. And we're going to do the Seahawks. And here we go. I'll put this up here so you guys can see it along with me. All right. So, who are going to draft first? I am really getting on the Emmanuel Pregnon vibe. I do like that Ben is with me on Zion Young. I don't think Zion Young's a bad pick there either. We've talked about D'Angelo Pons. Chris Johnson. This is a guy that you heard from James Foster yesterday is kind of exactly who I was describing as a great zone cover player who's also a good run defender, can play outside. I think Chris Johnson's a great pick there as well. I think the corner class is pretty deep. Let's do this. I don't think I've drafted Chris Johnson first. Let's see how that feels. I don't have a big problem. I want to trade back, honestly, but I didn't. So let's just play this out. So now we're at pick 64. And we've talked about Denis Dennis Sutton. We've talked about a bunch of these other guys. Devin Moore, Jalen Farmer, who James Foster compared to Anthony Bradford. So I'm sure a lot of people are jumping at that opportunity. Let's see. Do we have some trade offers? Who do we have? From 64 to 75. Let's see what that. I'm just going to play around with this. Let's see how this goes. I doubt we could get Let's see. Well, if we did this, let's see how this goes. This is a little bit of an interesting move. We're gonna move down in the third round, down in the second round, up in the third round. And yeah, this is not a great trade, to be honest. I'm just going quickly. So, but here we are at 75 now. And there's Devin Moore. We've already drafted Chris Johnson, so we definitely don't need him. There's Emmett Johnson. This is a reasonable place to start thinking about taking him. This is obviously in round 3. That could be a logical pick. Zakee Wheatley also is a guy I really like. Could be a logical pick as well. Let's see interior offensive line. Kalen Rutledge is interesting. We've still got Bo Stevens is going to be there a little bit later, so I think we could go that direction later. I like Billy Schroth, but I'm not sure he's as good of a fit for what the Seahawks are doing. Let's look at running back and see where running back is right now. I think Emmett Johnson's maybe my pick here, honestly. Who's the best player at a position of potential need? Let's look at safety. I mean, Zakee Wheatley is a really interesting pick as well. But and let's look at edge. I think edge starts to get pretty thin after this. There's Max Llewellyn. I mean, I think that's the problem with having not drafted an edge first, is you just kind of lose some of the guys that are really interesting by the third round for sure. All right, let's do this. We are going to take Emmett Johnson here with that pick. Then we're back on the clock at 87. I mean, honestly, I'm tempted to take Devin Moore. I think he's the best player on the board here, but it'd be 2 corners. I don't love that. You could double up at running back. Don't really love that either. There's Zakee Wheatley. I think that's the direction I probably go. Demetrius Crownover's a big dude. I think he's kind of an interesting one. There's Jalen Kilgore, who I know a lot of people are really big fans of. You know, can play a number of positions, 6'1", 211. Has a lot of different skill sets. I'm sure people are screaming to draft him right now. I'm not. Oh, there's Bo Stevens. Our next pick that's coming up is at 130. Do we risk not getting Bo Stevens? I don't know. I feel like that would be a mistake. But here's the thing. I'm going to stick with drafting the best player I think is on the board. And for me right now, let's look at Romello Hecht. I don't think he's too light. 240. I don't think that makes as much sense. I mean, you could go Logan Jones at center. I just am not a believer that you really need a center. So we're going to go Zakee Wheatley at safety. I like Zakee Wheatley. I think he is a really nice player to have coming up behind some of the other guys on that roster. All right, so then you're at pick 130 in the 4th round. Did we get lucky enough that we can get our interior offensive lineman at this point? There's Max Llewellyn. I would probably take him here. Let's take a look at interior offensive lineman. Oh, we missed him. Bo's gone. He's gone. No. All right. Well, I'm going to take Max Llewellyn. I like the rush moves that he brings, even if it is with the not most athletic profile. All right, and then our last pick in round 6. I can tell you already I'm not going to love this draft. But I like to just kind of go through all these different scenarios to get a feel. Oh, there's Kendrick Law. You know I'm picking Kendrick Law. You know I'm picking Kendrick Law. But let's look, just for the sake of looking at offensive line and who's there. Oh, Keegan Trost. So this was the guy that Mr. Foster yesterday was telling us about, that he really likes. Played right tackle, but is going to probably slide inside to guard. Let's take Keegan Trost. I love it. Let's do it. I feel pretty good about that, actually. That might be my favorite pick. So here we go. Chris Johnson, Emmett Johnson, Zakee Wheatley, Max Llewellyn, and Keegan Trost. I don't hate it. It was a bad trade that I made in the second round. Yes, I know. I gave up too much and got too little. But I think each one of these players has something to offer the Seahawks and could be really good picks in each of those rounds. So as far as going with best player available, I think that was a decent job in that regard. All right. That'll do it for this episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. Hopefully you guys have a great rest of your day. I am Brian M. Hauser. Take care.